All right. Good afternoon, everyone. All right. I want to welcome you to Christ Episcopal Church. My name is Kate Varnum, and I am a member here. I am part of the Episcopal Pride group here at Christ Episcopal, and I've helped organize this, and I want to thank all of our panelists and Charles here. We'll have them do introductions. We've got a reception afterwards, and I want to thank everyone who's helped with the reception. It's going to be fabulous food because, we love to eat. Church of the Open Mouth is what my father always called it. So the panelists will introduce themselves, but I asked Charles to be our moderator because he leads our adult forum on Sunday mornings, and I thought he would be a good person to do it. Members of this church have heard from me before, so you know my story. I'm not going to share it again. But I do want to share a few things with you, and the reason that we're doing this panel. A national study in 2016 found that more than 80% of LGBTQ people are raised in faith communities. Nearly 2/3 of LGBTQ people raised Christian no longer identify as Christian. And as religious affiliation has declined in the general population, nearly half of Americans who left religion cite the mistreatment or rejection of LGBTQ people as an important reason. However, many queer people are still searching for a way to have their identity and religion coexist. 76% of LGBTQ people who have left the church are open to returning to the faith. So that's why we're doing this. So I'll introduce you to everyone. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Charles Crawley. I'm a member of this church, and I want to thank Kate for giving me the honor of moderating it. And I'm the only cis person up here, so I think that puts me in the minority, which I think is good to feel what it's like to be in the minority. And so happy to have all the panelists. We've actually met with all of them individually to talk about their stories, and so we've heard them once and look forward to hearing them again. And Kate's really done a great job with this. This is her baby. And so thank you, Kate. So we're going to start off by having each of the panelists talk a little bit about themselves. And so I want you each to introduce yourself with your name and tell us a little bit about yourself. And then let's talk about church. Were you in church growing up? And I think all of you were. So if you would just tell us which church you attended and how involved you were at that time. So, and we'll start off with Dot, because she's just raring to go.
Very shy. Hello, everybody. Dot Sheldon, or Dottie. Preferably not Dorothy, but usually it's only if I'm in trouble. So, a little bit about me. I'm from New Jersey originally. Came here on witness relocation, and.
I don't think you're supposed to talk about that.
Oh, yeah. And I'm an Air Force veteran. I went in when I was 19. In terms of the churches along the way, I've been Episcopalian my whole life. I went with my folks and the family for a while, and then we moved to Central Jersey, and then I was going to another Episcopalian church. And it was actually in the hometown of Bruce Springsteen. I just like to, name drop. But he was a bud. No, he wasn't really. No. And let's see. I wasn't involved in church at all. When I was in the service, I probably went 2 times or something. It was probably a funeral or something. I didn't go to church. I did when I was a teenager. I used to get sick because they did the incense in the aisles every week. And I soon learned that got me out of church. I mean, I was honest, but I'm loud enough, aren't I? And then when I went in the service, it just wasn't really the opportunity with others. I mean, I would have to kind of seek it out, and I didn't do that. Anything else about me? The New Jersey part is really what I relate to a lot, especially if I say coffee or something like that. They give me a hard time, but I like it. I guess that's it. So for Amber?
One point real quick. Cis actually means the opposite of transgender. It means that you identify with the birth you were, or the sex you were assigned with at birth. So you are cis, I assume. Okay, there you go. So, hi, my name is Amber. I was born and raised mostly in Cedar Rapids here. I went to school, Prairie High School. I grew up at the Assemblies of God Church. My family was very involved growing up. By the time I was in high school, I think I was the only member of my church still going, very involved. I did vacation Bible study things growing up. I was in Bible quiz, where we would learn a chapter of the Bible or a book of the Bible every year, travel, get quizzed on it, like time thing, I like get my timer down really good, that sort of thing. Very involved with the drama team, even traveled with that sort of thing. So yeah, grew up very involved in church. And just as a heads up before we really get into it too, this is still a very sore subject for me. So I am a crier. That's probably going to happen, just to give you all heads up. I left Cedar Rapids to move to Florida in my late teens, early 20s to go to Bible college in Florida to become a youth minister. I no longer attend church. So there's been a lot of hurt through all of those things, but just that's my background.
My name is Julianne. My numbers are 3, 2, and 1. Being an engineer, I guess that proves I can count, but not downward. Yes, I was born in just a stone's throw out of Yellowstone. That was the first 6 years. We moved to Rapid City, where my father was a pastor. He was a pastor all the time I would have been alive. And so not less than a week after my birth, I was baptized, and so I was a member of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod for many years. And ironically, if I were to go back there, they would not let me be on the Board of Elders. Whereas, being a member of Trinity Episcopal in Iowa City, I was summoned to be on the vestry. And I ended up serving an extra year. So yes, from about the time I was 3 years old, maybe 4, if I could find a hammer and a saw and a piece of wood, I could create a boat for you. It would float very nicely and so forth. That really determined the career of my life, except that my brother was always he was a year ahead of me, and my teachers always said, well, you must be Paul's sibling. And I, by the way, I will always factor my previous life into what it is now. I will not use my contrary pronouns. So thank you. At that point, so I went to college up in St. Paul. Then I went to college in Fort Wayne. In both places, I studied pipe organ. I loved organ because the folks had a really nice stereo player. And by the way, my dad had lots of organ recordings. And so anything that is pop music, jazz music, whatever, is completely foreign to me. But you give me a Bach BWV number, and it says, oh, yeah, that one's in D minor. Okay. I felt the pull there. I went back to my 3-year-old, in fact, even to my 2-year-old, where my famous experiment was sticking keys into a light socket. And I watched my father's light up just as much as I did, from the shock of the situation. That then steered me into engineering. At college, the first year, I met the woman who was to become my spouse. And that is really item number 2 there, is that, I have 3 careers. The ministry would have been one of them. The education was my second one. And so about the time I was finishing up my master's degree at South Dakota Tech, I got a letter of invite inviting me to apply for an associate, not even professor, really an instructor at Valparaiso University, which I took there, and they hired me, not quite on the spot there, but it turns out I was the only one they brought on campus. I was a bit chagrined by that, but it says, well, with your letter about dedication to service. And that's where I've seen my life ever since, not only for ministry, but for education, and for my life of engineering over with my Collins colleagues here. And with finally there, so I went to that one for about 4 years. My department chair says, get out of here, come back when you know something. Well, he called me back 4 years later, And says, well, I don't know anything, but we still want you back. So I went back there for another 5 years. One of the VPs from over here at Collins called me and says, well, wouldn't you really, I did consulting for 4 years running. And he said, well, wouldn't you really want to come and do this for us? Well, in 1990, I did that. Collins was very generous. They moved me and my spouse here. We've enjoyed the place for, over more than 35 years now. That was 1990, so that I can't do arithmetic. I'm an engineer. But anyway, so my career at Collins was really quite wonderful for the most part of it, but the one thing the managers over there never learned is that when you have an engineer with a fully paid up pension, do not piss her off. She might retire, and she did. And so in 2012, I walked away from my job of engineering, and first thing I did is I walked over to the golf course and got a season pass for the year. Enjoyed that up until COVID, and then now I buy them by the round or whatever, but nevertheless, I still do my golfing when the weather permits and so forth. I became an Episcopalian really on All Saints Day in 1998. I was still living in my other self. But the truth is that I found that 1/7 of the week on every Sunday there, this would get put together. I would head down the freeway to Iowa City, and the people there loved me. At least I think they did. That's the impression I got anyway, right, Meg? Okay. And so as a result of that, I became a member, but it wasn't until 2004. And by the way of a phone call to HR, they send out one of these blanket emails, administrative type, and says, well, we have an ombudsman. I had an issue. And so I wrote to the general site there, and one of the HR people replies, is this an issue we can resolve over the phone? And it says, I don't think so. So after about 3 2-hour sessions with my HR person, she decided then that the way to handle this was for me and my spouse to disappear for about 2 weeks in August of 2004. That's the first my parents got to know me as Julianne. They didn't know about it, even though I had come out to a counselor in 1993. But they lived in the non-contiguous ice belt. That's your geography question for the day. And so after all of that, it was in 2004 then, what HR had decided that make the transition was that after I would come back from this vacation, so to speak, I would then report to the North Guard Shack. Everybody here at Collins knows that. The one off of Blair's Ferry. There I would call my manager. He would come out to me, meet me, take me inside to the security office, and at that point, they then changed out my Collins badge there for one that said Julianne, and it had a picture of Julianne as her. And that one never got hidden. The one before that was almost always hidden in my coat pocket or my shirt pocket. And so that's the kind of the story. At Trinity, by the way, I got appointed to the COM, the Council on the Commission on Ministry, and Meg was one of my clients. Our current rector at Trinity, Nora was one of our clients, and so forth. A great privilege to meet our future diocesan priests and deacons. And up to this point there, I'm still a member of Trinity, and I enjoy it ever since. Corey, what have you got to add to that?
I would love to hear more about your life. That's just amazing. Your story. So.
She won't let me have an hour, so.
Okay. Well, we'll get together sometime. Hi, everyone. My name is Corey Jacobson. I use my pronouns are he, him. And I am here today to speak about my own personal story. I am not, as many of you know, I am the board president of CR Pride, and I am not here affiliated with CR Pride today. I just like to make that note whenever I'm speaking in a public forum. I am a 4th generation Cedar Rapidian. I was born and raised here, went to Thomas Jefferson High School. Only time I've not lived in Cedar Rapids is when I was spending 4 years at the University of Northern Iowa getting my degree in management with an emphasis in human resources and a minor in Spanish, which I no longer use Spanish. And then 3 years where I lived in Dubuque because work took me there. I grew up in a family of faith. I grew up in the Methodist Church. I prefer not to say which church because they are still active, and my experience was not the greatest. My mom, we went to church every Sunday with my mom and my grandma and my brother and my sister. My dad was not overly religious, but he came and was what I call a creaster. He came on Christmas and Easter. I do have to say that when my father became ill and passed away from cancer when I was 16, the church family was there for my mom and my siblings and I was greatly appreciative of that. But I soon learned from conversations within the church that maybe this church wasn't as welcoming as they said they have been. I graduated college and I left the church pretty quickly thereafter, and I do not consider myself a person of faith any longer from my experience in my teenage years growing up at that time. So.
Okay. When did you first sense that your identity and your faith might cause conflict? That's a general question for each of you. When did you first sense that your identity and your faith might cause a conflict?
When I was at Rockwell, we had we had the resource groups. That's where I met Charles the first time. And two of us from the group were sent to Texas to actually meet with a couple Christians. So they had, it was kind of queer versus Christianity. We got down there, and there was a meeting that was going to happen, and they decided to do it first. So we were kind of like sequestered with these two other people, and here's the two queers, and here's the Christians. And we got to know each other, and it just didn't matter anymore. And that was very uplifting, I guess you could say, because, some people, they're so dug in their ways. They realized that we were just the same as them. We talked the same, we walked the same. So I just wanted to share that. I didn't know going there what it was going to be like. I expected adversity, but.
So believe it or not, I don't remember being told that gay was bad growing up. I'm sure those undertones were there. I remember my drama teacher from church at the time was previously gay, now married to a woman. So I know those things kind of existed, but they weren't, in my face or anything. I came out later in life, so I didn't experience those things while going to church. But since, I've lost family members over it because of their faith. So I'm going to hell, I'm a groomer, all of these things. So obviously those things are very at odds for me, including people who were family. So.
Test. There we go.
There we go. Yeah, see, you have to have a non-engineer to do this. Always got to go to management. I would have to say that I can't really ever say that I felt the discomfort, because I guess I've never really been outside of Lutheranism and Anglicanism. One of the things I really, really enjoyed, my father was in his life was a speed reader, and he went to his ministerial training in high school in St. Paul. And then throughout his early years in college, he was learning Greek. Except for all you priests and deacons here, that was not the Koine of the New Testament. That was classical Greek. And he was always big fear was, oh my God, when we get to the seminary, this is going to be wicked. Except that he says, well, when he found a Nestle New Testament, he says, this is like reading comic books. And I appreciate him for all of the study that he did. And so his preaching was always about who do we love and how do we treat our Christian faith. And through my own study of Greek and Hebrew, And by the way, I fell in love with the Hebrew language. And one of my favorite Hebrew profs had a sign on his door that said, "The only good language is a dead language." And Hebrew and Latin are about as dead as you can get, except unless you're SSPX there, I guess. That's an inside joke. Anyway, so the one of the most enlightening moments for me was in our description in Hebrew class of the Genesis 1 account. And when my favorite Hebrew prof disclosed that as a hymn to creation. And if you read Genesis 1, and I think I've been given the privilege of reading that at least once in church, and I read it as such. You read it as a poem. In the beginning, when God was creating the earth. It's a hymn. It's a praise of creation. It's not an AP wire account. Never was, never will be. And with all of that, you know, one thing about being a trans woman is there's absolutely nothing in Scripture, even though the evidence for the gay people is still pretty scant. But for trans people, there's nothing there. And says, well, okay, so what you going to come at it with us? We just don't like you.
I would say that I was 11 years old when I sensed that my identity and my faith might cause conflict. In addition to going to church on Sundays, we went to church on Wednesday nights for programming. In the summers, we went to Vacation Bible School. I volunteered at Vacation Bible School. My mom was a Sunday school teacher as well. And I noticed that one year on a Wednesday night, we had two women come to church with a child, which now looking back on it was a couple with a child. And there were a lot of looks given to them and a lot of like behind the scenes questions. And so I just felt very uneasy about that because I've always grown up within my family that we treat everyone with respect. And to me, there was a lot of disrespect there that evening. And then throughout the next couple of years, I would, as I was coming to terms with my own sexuality, seeing like an all are welcome sign at the church, and then you would see a gay couple or a lesbian couple come for a couple of weeks, and then you'd never see them again. And so I was really starting to question, how does this, where I'm coming to church every week, being told of God's love for everyone, but at the same time the people within this church are making people feel uncomfortable that they're not coming here anymore. And so I really questioned throughout my high school years, especially after my dad passed away, and I was coming to terms with my sexuality, was this a safe space for me? And I went to church religiously every Sunday because my mom went, my grandma was there, my brother and sister were going, and so I didn't want to do anything to rock the boat after my dad passed away. And so I today am very uncomfortable in church settings. I owe a lot of thanks to Susan, who's sitting in the second row over here, really helping me realize that churches aren't bad places. A lot of people in the LGBTQ community hear the word church and they go screaming as far away as they can from you. We have had people question why we allow churches to have booth space at the Pride Festival from people in the community, because that is their experience with religion.
No, thank you, Corey. You know, I think it's important for us to hear that. And, you know, we have the all are welcome signs, but sometimes people don't feel welcome. And I think in the article that Kate mentioned earlier, another point that it made was that LGBTQ churchgoers said that seeing visibly queer people is one of the strongest signals of safety. And so until they start seeing people like themselves in the church, they're not going to come. So we're going to drill down to some individual questions now. And Dot, we know that you stopped attending church for several years, And so what brought you back?
Oops. Well, one of the things, I was also a creaster. I came here a couple times over the years for Christmas, but I didn't really know anybody. I just left, and so in 22, I had breast cancer, and I didn't want to be that person that said, I'm going to go back to church because I have cancer. I didn't want to be that person. I wanted to go because I struggled a little bit with concepts of even Jesus Christ. It was just, I believe in God. I'm not atheist. I'm not even agnostic, but I couldn't wrap my head around that. And that turns out, you know what, it didn't matter, because when I did start coming here, I've learned stuff. I love Bible study. I never would have thought. So that basically, that's what brought me back, was when I started coming. People let me alone. I had a little beanie, didn't look very attractive, but I after the second or third week, I think I started talking to people and then volunteering, of course, because we do that. And I think that's about it. Yeah, and like I said, once I joined the church, it's like there's no looking back. Growing up Episcopalian, though, it was different. I will say that this is so much better, if I can. It was the church we went to in Freehold, in Jersey, was really high. I said the incense and stuff, but, and you had to get confirmed before you can get communion. All these things that over the years, I imagine they've decided either wasn't as important as other things or what. But I think that's about it, I love my church here, and if you don't have a little Jesus, I didn't bring them today, but we gave them out at Pride, and they go really fast, the little Jesuses. They're all over PCI, they're actually from here to New Jersey, in all the ladies' rooms. There's a little Jesus there, yep. Everybody needs a little Jesus. Oh, I'm sorry.
So, Corey, you talked a little bit about kind of your split with church, and could you say more about how your church has affected other aspects of your life?
I would say that I'm in my 40s now, and I don't care what people think anymore normally. But I was very cautious about being around people I didn't know, because and this is no one's fault but my own, I conformed to what was expected of society. And so when I look back at my high school years and when I was in college and starting my career and really establishing myself as my own individual, I think back to how many people never got to know the real me because I hid it. And so one thing that, when I look back at my years of church, I can still see that the core people that mattered most to me, even people that weren't my mom and my grandma and my sister and my brother, but the other people in that church, like a couple named Jerry and Dorothy, they lived the values of what it meant to love one another. And so I can look back now as an adult and kind of see that even though I was very conflicted and not seeing a safe space, that there were people within that church who really took the word of Christ to what it meant. And those are the people, even today, that I still feel the most comfortable with when I'm out in public. Like, my partner is here today, and like when we're out in public, we don't hold hands, and that's not because we don't probably want to. It's just that's the way I was back in my teens and 20s. I was very aligned within a box I had created for myself. And even, I loved my grandmother, and I still love my grandmother. She grew up in a different time. I never talked to my grandmother about my true identity and who I was. I remember back when same-sex marriage became the law of the land here in Iowa. and my grandma needed help voting, I had to vote Supreme Court justices out because they voted to give me equal rights. And I never had that conversation with my grandmother because I didn't want to upset her. But looking back on it, I was also scared that I would impact a relationship in my life that meant very much to me. And so today, I try to live openly and show a positive influence wherever I am to, the kids who are coming to terms with who they are, that they can see that there are people out here who want them to be themselves, who support them, and that there are safe spaces for them within areas where maybe they don't always feel safe.
Thank you, Corey. Okay, Julianne, what's interesting about your story is that it doesn't seem like there was ever a time when you were not attracted to the life of faith.
Right.
You grew up Lutheran,
Yep.
but you became an Episcopalian, and what drew you to the Episcopal Church?
Well, the answer might be a few.
It's on.
It's on? Okay, all right. Well, I have, being a child in the 1950s and the 1960s, you got to think about my father in his original call there was wearing one of the black Geneva gowns, and I think there are still denominations that do that. But about the time that he started going for his master's degree at the seminary in St. Louis, the one summer he came back then with, heaven forbid, a cassock and a surplice. Which I've kind of learned, as of late here in the last 20 years or whatever, that in the Episcopal Church, that is kind of a supplementary garment or a non-liturgical one, right, Meg? Not Eucharistic, okay. But anyway, so here he had the colored stoles, and being a fan of color, I absolutely love that. And so that was the first time in our church there that we had colored stoles there, just a couple of little, actually a priest stole that was cut in half there and draped over the altar. But anyway, what that then primed me for, that was the mid-1960s, and so when I got to what was called the senior college, where it was primarily men that were, yes, I was there too, who were preparing for the ministry. And this was just in the wake of Vatican II. Okay, for those of you that are old enough to remember Vatican II, in fact, just the recent history of the Society of St. Pius X is, in fact, they don't like Vatican II because it won't let them do their Mass in Latin. Well, I know it's Latin there to understand the Mass there, but I'm not sure I would do it every day. But at any rate, in our college there, that was also taking over Lutheranism. Lutheranism getting very progressive in the sense that we were going back to the ancient rituals, the ancient liturgies, the ancient styles of vestments, the alb, and not only that, the chasuble. And I fell in love with the chasuble. And so I had all of this training back from my days in the college. But of course, the Lutheran Church was always, no matter which branch, whether the ELCA, of which my spouse is currently a deacon, she will be forever, I guess. But at any rate, when we moved to Cedar Rapids, we became members over at St. Andrews. There they did have good vestments there and a pretty good pastor and pretty good liturgy and so forth, but it just wasn't quite there. And especially as I was feeling my coming to my real gender identity, I was feeling not just conflict because of that, but I also, because of all my other liturgical and biblical training, I felt I was in a spiritual desert. It just wasn't going anywhere. And by the way, they've got a nice little pipe organ over there, but not people that were playing it very well. And my mother never had to tell me, but it's just not polite to throw hymnals at the organist. Anyway, that all being said then, when I came out to my counselor at work, And people says, what the heck did you do that for? Well, I came in, and as a 40-year-old engineer, or even a 40-year-old manager or whatever, you say, well, my career might be getting stale. Things are always changing, and yeah, I try to keep up. And then for the second half hour of the hour, I says, oh, by the way, I got this little thing, and I rolled on my pants leg and says, I love to wear women's clothes. And I found out about a few months later that her jaw just about dropped through the concrete floor. But all that, I became comfortable enough coming out as Julianne, getting in my vehicle and driving to the meeting, whether in Iowa City or in Quad Cities or even Des Moines and so forth. I was comfortable. And I went shopping. In fact, in one of the panels that we did with one of the groups in Iowa City, one of the students asked us, said, well, you know, when you shop for spectacles that match your form, do you get a script for them? He says, oh, yeah. I got dressed up as Julianne and visited my optometrist because they work so much better that way for the spectacles. Anyway, so with all that having been said, I knew all about what All Saints is and what it can be. And so we had a member of Iowa Artistry, our support group, who was also a member of Trinity, a professor at the University of Iowa. She transitioned on the 18-minute plan, not the 18-year plan. But she says, well, why don't you come to Trinity? And I think I was ready to, because during my liturgy studies at the senior college, I knew what the Anglicans were about. And so being All Saints Sunday, and the incense, by the way, was flowing freely, which I said, oh, yes. The torches were lit. The choir was singing for all the saints. And the priest there in his opening sermon says, by golly, I love a parade. And I was ready to stand up and shout, but I didn't quite do it. But he says, so do I, brother. And I've been there ever since because of, my biblical revelations and my revelations, being invited by the bishop to the council commission on ministry. I'm getting old, I can't remember names, especially in this something, but I've been there and I found the love. And oh, by the way, I was even privileged to be at the General Convention in 2018 when there was still some of the marriage equality was there, but it was still sticky. And by the way, when I had lunch with Charles and Kate here a couple weeks ago, I said, Varnum, is that a common name? I says, no, but Trish and I were the ones. Oh, yeah. I said, go Kate and Trish there and go Iowa Supreme Court. So.
Thank you. Amber, this is for you. And members of Christ Episcopal Church, a lot of us come because of the social aspect. When we pass the peace, the priest often has to give us a dirty look, say, okay, come on back now. And anyway, when you left the Christian church, do you feel that you lost some of that community and when you came out? And what have you found to kind of replace that?
That's an excellent question. Yes, initially I absolutely did. Growing up, again, I was very involved in my church, especially through high school and all of those things. A core of my friend group was there. That was going to be my life. I don't have communication with them anymore. This is something I've talked about in therapy quite a few times, though, is that growing up with this sense of these are the things that we care about, our values, to be Christ-like. If those are the things that I valued, the things that I strove for, to care about other people, to fight for, and then I was dismissed or shunned for those things by the very people who told me they loved me and that they were people of faith. That never sat with me. So I have done my best to find those people. There are people, those very people in this room. I'm looking at you. You're one of them. Who go out of their way to try to fight for the marginalized groups of people, all types of people, and make those sacrifices. I recently got a few tattoos. One says do it scared. The other says be a problem. And those are goals I continued because although I don't follow the faith anymore, there are still core values that are very important to me. And I'll be damned if I'm going to let those things just, yeah.
Yeah, when you talk about, the LGBT community is marginalized, is oppressed. And if Christians are not willing to stand with them, then I don't know what we stand for. So, this is for...
Piggyback on that a little bit. Just want to piggyback a little bit. This was the early 80s now. Sorry, I take notes because I've been kind of lapsing in brain stuff. When I was in Massachusetts, there was a therapist that was telling me this woman came to her and was in a neighborhood. I got people saying things to me as well, and I had a clearance, okay, in the military and then in the 6 years after, so I couldn't be out. It's right on the form for getting a clearance back then. It was that said, "Are you homosexual?" So you had to lie or get kicked out of the service, or yeah. So anyway, this woman went to there and she said that she was worried about her neighborhood, and going through. She said the two of her and her partner were walking along the street in, I think, Cambridge or something, and some kids just said, "How do you know each other?" Because they just moved into the area. She said, "We're sisters," because you had to have some kind of. And so the whole neighborhood thought they were nuns. So I just wanted to share that one.
So this is for Corey and Amber. I think you would probably both say that you don't consider yourself a Christian any longer. I mean, is that true for you, Amber?
It's been a moving point for me. I would say a few years ago it may have been more so, but at this point, no, I do not.
I call myself a former Christian. And I can boil it down to 2 points. When I was testing the waters in high school, I reached out to talk with my minister at the time. He was not my childhood minister. He had came in after our other minister retired, and we had recently had an acquaintance at school. I'd say we weren't friends, but we talked to each other. And he came out, and he was being bullied at school. And so I just said to my minister that day, I have a friend at school who came out and told everyone he's gay and he's been being bullied. And his response was, well, that's what you should expect when you go against God's will. And he'll probably die of AIDS. And so that was my first experience talking about maybe who I could be and am, right? And so then about a year later, as I'm seeing life's adjusting for my acquaintance that I know, and how you can tell he's different. And I really wanted that. And that's when Matthew Shepard was murdered in Cheyenne, or Laramie, Wyoming. And so I reached out to my minister again after service one day and talked about, I was really upset about what had happened to Matthew Shepard. And the response was, yes, that is a horrible thing, but when you go against God's will, things like that will happen. And I just knew then that church wasn't for me anymore. I was 17, and I never felt safe there again. And I've never told my mom that because I didn't want to upset her. I didn't want to upset my grandma. And I thought, we had just lost my dad to cancer, and we were building life back to what it is now. And it was just something that I never felt like I can handle this. And I did through high school, and I've never, I did consider myself a person of faith for a while, but looking back on it now, I haven't been for some time. But I still like to think some of the things that I learned through church, I still practice. So I do say, do unto others as you would undo to yourself, or whatever that is. I just messed it up. Former Christian here, I'm going to forget things. Love one another, respect people, and do good in the world. And so even though I don't consider myself a Christian, some of those teachings that I heard throughout my years within the church, I still strive to live up to those, to have that influence and be a positive influence in the community, so that people know that, yes, there may be one area where they're not maybe feeling safe or comfortable. I want to create that space for them, whether it be a one-on-one conversation, a hug in a parking lot, which, yes, that has actually happened. When you hear the words, hey, you're the pride person, right? That can go one or two ways, and sometimes you don't know if you want to say yes or no. But just creating those spaces where people can gather and be themselves, and it has been eye-opening over the last 5 or 6 years as I've gotten to know Susan really well, that this is a different side of Christianity that I never witnessed before. And so while I never see myself going back to church, it's nice to know that there are a lot of people in the LGBTQ community that want a faith community. And it's nice to know that there's places that I can say, I know somewhere where you can go if you need that, and here's places you can go.
Okay, well, you kind of answered the next question. So good job. It was, is there anything that would bring you back to a faith community? So maybe we'll give Amber a chance to answer that, and then you can respond if you want to.
Again, like I said, it's been kind of a shifting thing for me. I think I find that I have less and less faith these days. I don't think I can align my belief system anymore with an all-powerful, this God that allows that the way the world is. That doesn't fit in my head anymore. I can't find faith or joy in it, and therefore there's no Marie Kondo this, right? Like there's no, doesn't bring me joy anymore. So no, yeah.
I don't think so. I have a great life, and I'm happy with what I've built with my family, and the impact I have in the community. And I found different ways to, I don't want to say replace a church family, but when I look back, I don't see it as an important part of what I need to live a fulfilling life.
Well, thank you for your honesty. So, Julianne, what positive changes have you seen in the Episcopal Church in the last several years?
Well, as I was thinking about this one, I really had to kind of guard myself against too far into the weeds there. But one of the things I have to think about, being an Episcopalian, we are but yet one part of the Anglican communion. And so I think within the U.S. of A., for the most part, we're doing pretty well as Episcopalians. I had the joy and the pleasure of receiving the invite to go as an alternate deputy to the 2018 General Convention. And for those of you that are not Episcopalian, that's where we meet once every 3 years. And for the most part, it's more like a legislative session than anything else. So lots of committee hearings and so forth and general votes. Well, through the general conventions already, I think it was in 2012, is when the Episcopal Church decided to go ahead with ordaining gay and lesbian people. And then further along then, in the 2018 convention, there were two things that really happened there. One was, I think, was affirming or maybe that was in 2015 when they did the ordination of trans people, okay? the fact that they are ordaining my kind of people to be up in front, out in the back, like hi, Brian, and so forth, that's extremely encouraging. And in fact, when I think about, Kate and Trish and myself and my spouse, oh, by the way, I will usually call her a spouse, not a wife. Not that she isn't a wife. I know you two are very proud about that nomenclature, but still, I mean, it's a thing where I feel very blessed to be in the Episcopal Church because everything I've seen is joy. One of the kind of the heartache moments was when our previous bishop, Alan Scarf, went to, every 10 years, there's something called the Lambda Conference. It takes place in England there, and it's a meeting of all the Anglican communion. Well, for some of the part there, that is a very good thing. But on the other hand, as you know from the Methodist Church, my current counselor is a Methodist, and so she feels all of the pain that is happening with the split of the UMC because of, even allowing somebody who is gay to take up a stole and deliver a sermon, or even for the Southern Baptists. I saw something in the last few weeks. They will definitely affirm that women will not present sermons or teach in the Baptist church. Good Lord Almighty, how would they classify me? The seminary where I was wouldn't even let me know. Well, what's your name? Julianne. I'm sorry, we don't admit women in it. Not yet, not still. And I think, when I've seen, our Meg back here and our own priest and our deacons and so forth, not to have women in our presence as our clergy is such a loss. The Roman Catholics, well, I saw that our current pope there, not our pope, but at least the church's pope there says, well, no, we're still not ready to think about women, even though we're short of priests everywhere, and they would sure be able to fill in the gaps. Anyway, all of that being said, sort of then segueing into the question about what about being LGBTQ? There was, I would say more than an instance, a happening in our own family. My one sister found the love of her life there while she was at the same college in St. Paul. She and the young fellow decided to have a wedding, beautiful, beautiful wedding, for which I was the organist, by the way. They still got married anyway. It came out a number of years later, and one child later, that Jimmy was gay. And I don't know if my sister knew that or not, but when my brother and his wife got married, they were both military. He was in the Navy, she was in the Air Force. They were down in Biloxi, and so we took a big trip from Atlanta, when I was at Georgia Tech. The folks came in, and my sister came in with her daughter, and we packed them into a Lincoln Town car and headed down from Atlanta down to Biloxi and had a great time of it all. But at that point, my sister did not have her husband with her. And so my spouse and I conjectured and said, well, why is that? And I said, well, is that because Jimmy is gay? We only found out a couple years later for sure that was the case. And Jimmy then died of AIDS because as a nurse, by the way, he didn't go into teaching, he became this beautiful nurse. And the story was that, especially being like in a nursing home, little ladies just love to have Jimmy as their nurse because he was such a wonderful fella. But, he then moved to Salt Lake City from Idaho. And in the process, he told us that there were, like you mentioned there, so many of the Mormons are gay. Well, they're no more gay than the rest of the population. But on the other hand, since it is such a forbidden behavior, it's a wonder there that the that the Mormons survive. By the way, just a couple other notes. When my sister then passed away 2 years after that, it was from a cardiac issue, as well as what my sister just told me. Sister, not sister, she's my spouse, even though my organ prof thought she was my sister, but anyway. At that point, what my spouse told me was that my sister really died of AIDS. And the fact that I didn't know that until 30 years after the fact. Anyway, but we had a meeting with my father at my aunt's place, his sister's place in Illinois, and we were out on the porch in a nice summer September evening, sipping red wine. And, of course, my father was even more educated in Greek than I ever was. And when I told him about what one of the ways of reading St. Paul's letter about being gay, is, well, if that's the case, then what am I to think? So the confrontation right there with my father, the pastor who had read 4 to 5 pages of Greek every day of his life. And so, by way of a much happier story, there was a wedding, a beautiful wedding at Trinity. What was it, maybe 3 years ago? 2 women reaffirming their civil marriage, and just an absolutely beautiful thing. As lesbians, we don't see them in church very often because they're both medical workers. They both work in the ED. And so they have to work on Sundays as often as not. But they and several other couples who are lesbians and gays in the parish, they're among us like they were absolutely no different. And because of Episcopal policy, not Anglican communion, but just about, a month or 2 ago, they announced our new Archbishop of Canterbury, who is, hold your breath, a woman. Praise be to the Lord, and I would love to meet our Archbishop.
Thank you. Okay, we'll have one last question for Dot, and then we're going to open it up for questions. And so, Dot, how do you respond when someone says that being a Christian is incompatible with being LGBTQ?
Give it up. All right. He forgets that I'm from Jersey. It's like, what? Okay. I would never. So my big thing about, also I just want to say for the Episcopal Church very quick, is the all are welcome. And that makes a difference, really does here. And it's true. It really is. I mean, I don't know, I can't get into somebody's head if they're not. But they sure, at least while they're here, they behave accordingly, that everybody's equal. But I have, the responses, it was Facebook, basically, and somebody just posted a really vile anti-Democrat or what, it doesn't matter what party, it was just vile. And so I responded something I didn't care for being called the expletive that she did, and she said, "Oh, it's not you, Dottie, you're cute." What the heck? East Coast people. So I didn't post it then, I just blocked her because I didn't want to see it. It was a relative, a nephew's mother-in-law. And so I cited Matthew 22, 36 through 40, where, God's saying, I'm number 1 and your neighbors are number 2. That's true. I just never thought of it that way. A couple of them are, and they're really hard to love. And and it is a message, though. That's one of the hardest things to do, is to love your neighbor when you know that they're not lovable to you. I mean, they're lovable to somebody, I hope. But so I work on that. That's a biggie. Loving God is not a problem for me, and I always have. Jesus came along later. Okay, that's all I got.
Thank you. We're going to open it up for questions now, and I'll bring the microphone. We are recording this, so we want to hear the questions. And you're welcome to ask all the respondents or any of them.
Can I make a caveat with that?
Yes.
Questions asked with respect only, please. If it's disrespectful, I'm going to ask you to leave.
Don't forget I'm from Jersey.
I'm from Texas.
So this is one for Amber. Are you able to separate Christianity from Christians?
You're mean.
And I love you.
She asked me this question before as we were kind of talking about this panel, and I looked at her, I was like, that's a really good question. It's a very good question. That's a challenge for me, because that's supposed to be the walking symbol of the faith, right? Living that, like I talk about being Christ-like, that was supposed to be the whole point. And so no, I don't think that I can. Yeah, I think to me, it's too entwined, yeah.
I'm wondering about grief as you've gone through these experiences. And I'm wondering if anybody might be willing to talk about that experience.
I mean, I can, because I'll cry. So we're all yeah.
All right. I guess I have to say that, you know, that there's when you look at transitioning from one gender identity to another, there's a whole checklist, you know, well, your spouse, your home, your job, and so forth. And I have been one of the very, very lucky ones that they were green all the way down. Never an issue about that. And so I haven't had a lot of grief that way. But one of the things, as I was thinking about transitioning, was that I don't know if for those of you that can read voices, if I were in my native voice, as I tell people, well, what choir voice do you sing? Well, I sing shortstop. What the heck is that? Well, that's somewhere between second and third base. Anyway, never mind. Oh, yeah. But anyway, so one of the things that happened is that along the way between my high school choir teachers and my college choir professors, I learned to sing very, very well. And the one thing I was afraid of missing was that when I now present as a female, in what voice shall I sing? But yet, God be the glory, I can sing higher than some of the sopranos there at Trinity. And that's what I do. And so I love singing, and that's one of the things that brought me to Trinity is we have very, very good organists and choir directors. I'm not in the choir because, oh, by the way, the people from Iowa City can tell us that's a long ways away. But anyway, so yeah, that was, I think, you know, the one sadness that I did have. The other one might be, well, what about the gender confirming surgery? I almost laugh at that because in the year 2022, I was diagnosed with colon cancer. Well, my colon surgeon took out a piece of my colon just about as long as what was removed during the confirmation surgery. Do I miss it? Absolutely not. One of my good colleagues there went to a physician in Canada called Menards. And what was so funny about that is, you know, the slogan there from being in our stores here, plumbing, electrical, and appliances too. Anyway, all
right. So obviously I don't want to, we all have kind of that Collins background, so I was really fortunate to find community there. Really building a group there, which was really helpful, kind of coming into my own identity more and actually changing my whole career path once I was let go from there. But aside from that, grief has been an ongoing issue. I like to describe my feelings as squishy some days, and today they're squishy. So I have almost no communication with most of my family because of my identity. I think if you knew my biological father, you would likely think he has one child. There are three of us. His mother just passed away this couple weeks ago, and the text I received, which was the first time I've talked to him in 2 years, said, just to let you know, my mom died. Not your grandma, not anything like that, it was my mom. When my mom passed away, I feel like I had already lost a lot of community from the church I grew up in, the church I wanted to get married in but was not allowed to, all of those things. Those people weren't around for when my mom passed. As a matter of fact, the woman who performed that service told us, that's too much, sorry. My grandmother was the first person to properly gender and to name my partner, which was so beautiful. She was in her 80s. She's now 93. We have still had conversations about that I'm going to hell. That comes from the church she's currently be going to. And it has been a struggle, but my loving human has told me to consider it from her point of view. She's 93. She's grown up in the church. Her point of view is we're not going to be together after she passes because of my lifestyle. So she views this as an act of love to tell me to get back on course. So I've struggled with that, but I try to have the grace for her because she means the world to me. So, meanwhile, my baby sister in Florida, again, going to hell. She can't align with my lifestyle. When I ask what lifestyle, because I'm going to be cheeky about it, refuses to give me those words. And she says, well, you know what I'm talking about. So, yeah, I've lost most of my biological family at this point. But I've been so lucky in the amazing other humans in my found family. These beautiful people who love me for who I am. And I could not be more grateful.
I grieve for the people who didn't get to know me. I have no, looking back, anything to apologize for. God made me this way. And for the people who can't accept me for that, that's your problem. And I grieve for you for not being able to live up to the Christian values you so claim to follow.
Well said.
For me, I'm loud enough. Y'all wimps.
Do one other recording.
Yeah. Oh, ooh. Not having never told my parents, that's kind of, I don't know if it's grief, but it's, I don't think it would have been great. I called my one brother that I was closest to and said, I want to tell mom and dad, and I was crying on the phone, and he said, don't. And I just remembered that, so I didn't. Dad died in 82, mom died in 85, and then, but as soon as they died, I moved from Boston area to here in 86. And I didn't have a job with a clearance, so I could be me. And I successfully. I was at Rockwell down in Corville for my first 10 years. And I was out by probably the first year, basically I've been out. And at Rockwell, like my second year working there, and I worked there 32 years. So for 31 years, people pretty much accepted me. They didn't have a choice, you know, because I don't want to be in your face, but I'm going to tell you who I am. So that I felt lucky, and it sounds like Rockwell actually wasn't too bad for you. It wasn't too bad. I don't know. Yeah, wow. A lot of people are grateful not to be there anymore.
The administration has changed a lot of things, and the rules and what they were allowed to do, and things that we worked really hard for. Yeah, Rockwell Collins itself was great at funding those things. Then the mergers and the administration, it's not what it was. Yeah.
Well, I think one thing I'd like to add to that, like I said, with the discussions with my HR person and her creativity in getting it there, one thing that I really gathered after that is that I could be a yellow monkey squeaking or whatever, and if I could do my job, I would still be welcome there. But I think at the same time there were a number of trans people there, and so they were just as welcome doing their jobs well and being welcomed at the table. By the way, one other thing, in the interpretation of Genesis 1, every time I hear that, the one verse of that I absolutely sing and rejoice at is, God created them male and female. She created them, and never mind if they're all in the same body, because we all know they are. So
I just want to say thank you for being part of our community. We are all the better for it. We just talked about grief. What are some moments that have given you hope or have been salve to the wounds that you have had that maybe give you that extra hop through the rest of the day, or that you go and tell somebody who you care about this great thing happened?
Well, let's be honest. Right now, it's tough out there. I have 3 boxes of privilege. I'm white. I'm a man. I'm a cisgender. I just happen to be gay. And so I know that my lived experience is completely different than a lot of people that are part of the LGBTQ community. So one thing I strive to do is hear their stories, because I do get to interact with people in positions of power sometimes, and I like to be able to tell those stories when I'm in rooms with those individuals who have the ability to make policy and create a just and an equal society for everyone. But one thing that, to answer your question, I, about a year or so ago, was in the Fairway parking lot. And I had one of those moments of, hey, you're the pride guy, right? And I turned around and I said, it was a kid. Couldn't have been more than 15 or 16. And I said, well, yes, I am. And he proceeded to tell me that he had gone to the Pride Festival with his friends. He was so excited to have spent the day there and to see all the flags and everyone just having a great time. And I said, well, I'm so glad that had an impression on you. And then he just got this like fear on his face. And I didn't know where this was going. I'm in the middle of the Fairway parking lot, right? And he starts crying. And he says to me, I wish I could tell my mom that I'm gay. And I looked at him, and I'm starting to tear up now, and I don't tear up. And we had a little bit of a conversation. And I said, how many people know your story? And he says, I've never told anyone my story. And I said, you just did. And that gives me hope, because that kid felt safe enough to talk to me, because he'd seen me in public, living my life as myself, having an impact. And we just happened to run into each other, right? And I ran into him not too long ago. And he came up to me. Yes, it was at the Pride Festival. And I said, how's this year's going? And he said, great, I'm here with my mom. That gives me so much hope for these times that we live in, is that when we are told that you cannot be different, there are people out there that says, just be yourself. And so there are tough days. I have a lot of tough days. I question about how I can always put a smile, like, oh, we're having the Pride Festival this year. That right there shows you the importance of everything that we do, not just through CR Pride, but PFLAG or Tanagers Youth Center. The difference that we're making right here to create those safe spaces for those kids. And I'll keep doing that as long as I am able to.
Well, I think one of the things that really, really makes me very sad is the whole notion there that you have to pass, in the trans world, you have to pass as a woman if you're a trans woman, and vice versa if you're a trans man. But I find that so very sad. Well, I was lucky enough to have a career that paid sufficiently well. Most of you wouldn't even know that I'm wearing a hairdo. Okay, I have a very good hairdresser. I have had, I've got a physician in every port because I've got a very good retirement health plan and so forth. We have, and I'm going to advise a couple of my Trinity people, we have a trans woman who comes to Trinity just very meekly and has trouble, just speaking very clearly. She told me last time I spoke with her that she's a very good chef. If anybody has an opening where you need somebody that can cook but doesn't need to be displayed, my gosh, I've got a woman for you who might be able to do that. But all of that saying, well, if you don't measure up to the American standard of beauty, then don't bother. Well, I think for the most part, I've been fortunate enough, every once in a while, the one thing about my voice that I really hate and I really mourn is that every now and then, as you see, I have quite a bit of water here. That's what keeps my voice lubricated. If I have to speak on the phone, I'm not very good at convincing somebody that I am a female. I almost have to use an expletive that says, no, I am a woman, I'm not a whatever. Okay.
I want to piggyback off Corey. It's the youth, 100% for me. Those moments of joy also make me squishy. We were just at a friend's kiddo's graduation, and one of the photos they had up was her red face just screaming at a protest. And I thought, that is the most beautiful thing I've seen in a long time. Yeah, so those are the things that give me hope and give me joy.
Got one in the back here.
Say something? Just what advice would I give someone who wants to, or that I would want to open to the faith community and to hear? It's real. That's one of the things too. You can find out real quick if something's going to be fake or just just to get people in the seats. But after coming here, I'm so grateful to myself for doing that. It's kind of putting yourself out there, and I was just like very self-conscious of the whole no hair thing. Sorry for those bald men here. Yeah, it's right in line there. I'm getting a little bit of a glare. Could you move? Oh, sorry. So anyway, just to try it, and I'm not pushing for people that have made their decision that it's not good for them or not for them. But like we have a Celtic service here at 6 p.m. on Sundays. That's great for some people. They don't want to be there. Oh, they don't want to be there. That was good. I got a coach here in the front. And that's all I have to say about that. Do you want to wrap it up or?
Well, we've got a question.
Oh, okay.
Let Dave have the last question.
Oh, David, yeah.
Well, I'm honored to have the last question. I have a comment and then a question. And my comment is thank you to the panelists for your leadership, for your vulnerability, and for sharing your inspiring stories. I'm not going to make this about me, but I'm a recovering Catholic and have suffered religious trauma. And I want to thank Christ Episcopal for inviting us into this space today to have this conversation and to have this dialogue. And I think that we are blessed in Cedar Rapids to have a number of progressive churches where I certainly feel welcome and I really am inspired by the great work they do in our community. All right, that's a comment. So the question is for Amber, if you can handle one more question. And it comes
This is
from
the first time you've heard me cry, so bring it on. What you
I
got?
I don't think this is a crying story, but we'll see. If you want to cry or anybody else wants to cry, of course you're welcome to. I was interested in your story about going to Bible school in Florida. All of us who are queer were closeted at some point, and we've made decisions in our life to maybe kind of hide our gayness. And I'm just curious, I know you were really involved in the church, but I'm just curious, how much of that was authentic and how much of that was, well, I know I'm different, I know I'm queer. If I pray really hard and I surround myself with people, Christians, then maybe I'll be more normal and accepted by my family and society.
That's an excellent question. So I refer to myself as a late in lifer, right? But I think that was because of my upbringing. I was never in a position where it was something I could even question. that was just, you can't be gay. That's not a thing, right? So although I don't remember it being reinforced that gay people are bad, as a churchgoer, as a member, that wasn't something I could be. I literally, at that point when I was talking about going to Bible college, that wasn't something I knew about myself. It was shoved down so deep. Like, I look back and I'm like, there were moments, there were glimmers, right? But I have to look in those as hindsight because, at the time I was going to go to Bible college. I was dating a man. We got married and we're together 20 years. Yeah. The reason I kind of came to the realization of my true identity was thanks to my best friend. And it sounds so weird, but we were doing roller derby together, big queer community. I love that within the roller derby. She fell in love with a woman. She was also married to a man, had a couple children, and had a very supportive spouse at the time who said, go get her. Go, like, if this is a thing, that this is who you are, go get her. So we were having a conversation about afterwards, and she was explaining to me all of this, of her coming out. And she looked at me and she's like, well, you're gay too, right? No, I am not. But it watered a seed, I think, right? That had always been there, but gave me the opportunity to question myself. So no, she didn't make me gay, right? But it gave me the opportunity to do that in true inspector of look. And yeah, I'm gay. I use the term queer. I do still consider myself under the bi umbrella, but yeah. So at that point, I don't think it would have had anything to do with it because I didn't know. I didn't allow myself to know. Thanks for asking.
Well, I think my one response to that is that as a trans woman, you cannot hide. I mean, all three of my colleagues up here, I could meet them on the street unless I really asked him. Says, well, are you gay, Corey? And he says, no, not really. As a trans woman, I always feel that. And oh, by the way, the one thing I did not mention much of was my spouse. And I have to say that sometimes I both feel for her and sometimes I feel very thankful that she's been supportive of me. By the way, like I said, she is now an ELCA deacon. At the time that she was getting ready to go to seminary, and they have something very similar to our Commission on Ministry, and at the time they had an outgoing bishop because they had a bishop election coming up there, and the bishop at the time did not want to touch her candidacy because, oh, by the way, she was married to somebody who might be a trans woman. Oh, heavens, lions and tigers and bears and trans women, oh my. So yeah, so that she has been very much of a blessing, and one of the things I wanted to show here is that on my left hand, on a significant finger, you'll see 2 rings there. One is my original wedding band from the wedding back 53 years ago. The other one is my engagement ring bought many, many years later by my spouse, and so I always wear both of those unless I'm golfing or something like that where they get in the way. But anyway. So she has been very much of a blessing to me, and I thank the good Lord that's one thing that we do share is she's very committed Christian. She's been with me for all of the surgeries and the traumas I've been through. She doesn't like to do surgery, so I don't have to do much of that. But anyway, so yeah, it has been an absolute pleasure being here, and if I can spread the word and. By the way, the people at Trinity didn't even question me for 10 years until one finally says, well, will you be willing to speak to our Sunday morning discussion group? Yeah, okay. Anyway, so I think that's acceptance there, and I really hope and pray that the people here find that. I really do. So.
I want to take a moment to talk about there is hope. There are faith communities who, when they say all are welcome, truly mean it. And several of those congregations are represented here today. So I've had the honor of bringing together many of these faith communities, about a couple years now, I think it's been. In the back, on the back table there is this flyer, and it's the Inclusive Faith Spaces of Lynn County. And you might note, there's a lot of folks listed on this flyer. These are the folks who truly put out that unconditional welcome. And they work hard at it, and many of them have gone through a lot of challenges to get to that place of creating these welcoming spaces. So I invite you to grab a flyer back there and consider. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. I want to thank Charles for leading us. You did a great job. I really want to thank our panelists. They have given a lot of themselves today, and I really appreciate it. We could have had 4 other people, and you would have heard totally different stories. This is just a very tiny cross-section of the community and of the experiences that people like us have had with church. My story is totally different from theirs. Trish's story is totally different from theirs. And I really thank you. It takes a lot to be up here. Let me tell you, it takes a lot to put yourself out there. So thank you very much. We've got a wonderful reception here. At the back table, along with the Inclusive Faith information, is information about Safe Zone training. Trish and I lead Safe Zone training here a couple times a year. I totally recommend it. We've done it for about 3 years now. Even if you think you are the biggest ally, Ryan has been to it and has always been the biggest ally. And it's in October, and there's no Hawkeye game that day. So I picked a day. I picked a Saturday with no Hawkeye game. But even if you think you're the biggest ally ever, you need to come to Safe Zone training because you will learn something. You will learn about 5 things that you didn't know because we've done it for 3 years and we're still learning about 5 things each time. So, but thank you, everyone. Again, another big round of applause for our panelists and our moderator. So thank you, everyone. They'll stick around to talk. Thank you. Go enjoy food. You guys were great.